Hello, and salutations, my friends. Today, I'll be honoring you all with a review of Alina of the Arena. This game was developed by Pinix and jointly published by both themselves and IndieArc on October 13th, 2022. And Alina of the Arena is a roguelike deck builder where you play as Alina, a gladiator who fights off a variety of enemies by herself in an attempt to achieve fame, fortune, and glory. And given the type of game this is, it doesn't really have a riveting story that is worth elaborating on, so I'll just skip this portion of the review and go straight into the gameplay. To even have a chance at success, you'll need to first select a character class and difficulty setting before beginning your run. And at the start, the game does a great job at making you feel like a low-ranked gladiator with nothing to your name as you fight through the ranks. And while the journey is challenging, I say that the game balances difficulty well enough to that progression never feels unbearable, and every decision matters as you'll need to carefully consider each move and how you want your deck to evolve before facing the final boss. The key to building an effective deck lies in just trimming the fat and removing cards that doesn't fit your strategy, upgrading your core cards, and maintaining a small deck that allows for consistent access to your best options. And as with many games of this kind, if you've played anything like this before, you'll need to choose between different paths. And in this game it would be 3 paths, and you're not really locked into any specific route, so I guess maybe that differs from other games like this. I just don't play too many games like these, so I can't really comment on this too much. But since only a certain number of battles are required before facing the arena's champion, you can decide whether to take on every available fight or just optimize your run by avoiding unnecessary risks. And as you work toward crafting your perfect deck, you'll also navigate various tiles, which represent different encounters, and I would go through those encounters now. With basically every single battle in the game, you have a hexagonal gladiator arena that you're thrown into, and every single turn presents you with a randomized set of cards. And as with any deck builder, you're restricted in how many cards you can play at once, and your movement is determined by the cards that you draw, which means that you need to plan carefully so you don't die. And yeah, that's basically how every single game will go between the different types of battles that you have. However, to go into more specific battles, I'll just do a little speed run. For regular battles, you're basically against standard enemies, the standard fare. For elite battles, you're facing, slightly more powerful, regular enemies, and these ones have more mechanics and special abilities, and I feel like they have more advanced AI too. And as for the champion battles, these face you against basically the big boss, and these obviously have their own special abilities and special mechanics and other things like that that make it a very interesting battle to have. In between battles, you obviously have, the utility tiles, and I'll go into a bit of those too. So you have rest tiles that allow you to recover your lost health or upgrade your cards, and you also have meditate tiles that allow you to refine your deck by removing or adjusting cards in your deck to sort of fine-tune your strategy. You also have access to shop tiles that allow you to expand your options as you can spend your currency on new cards, equipment, and extra item slots that can make or break your run. And finally, you have event tiles that introduce an element of unpredictability. Each encounter presents a unique scenario, and sometimes they grant valuable rewards and other times they throw unexpected obstacles in your path. And whether they work in your favor or not is entirely up to chance. So yeah, that's basically all the utility tiles that you would find throughout a run in the game. And that brings me to the final boss of the entire run. And this is where the progression loop pays off, as you should no longer feel like just a struggling gladiator, but rather a warrior that's just tearing through everything in your path. And I find that to be a pretty nice progression system in the game, and it felt really nice. And what makes this even better is that once you beat the final boss and conquer the arena, you unlock a mystery shop tile, which always appears at the start of future runs. And the shop gives you the chance to purchase core pieces of your build, like right from the start, which makes it a useful form of meta progression. And the more arenas that you clear, the more currency that you could spend here. So you could honestly exploit this if you really want by restarting your run if the shop doesn't offer what you really need. And whether that's cheating or smart play is up for debate, but I personally use it a lot for achievement hunting, which I'll get into later. Unfortunately, the game isn't without its flaws, as a major issue is how confusing it can be for players unfamiliar with roguelike deck builders, such as myself, to get into the mechanics, as they're pretty deep, but they aren't explained well enough to ease new players into the experience. And sure, you can sort of get into it over time and learn by trial by fire, but I felt like I was just sort of smashing my head against a wall at the start and I couldn't even leave the first arena. But that being said, the true final boss fight is honestly an absolute highlight of the game, as everything about it, to the entrance, the music, the sound design, and the chaotic difficulty, it just makes it an unforgettable battle, and the dopamine rush that comes from finally beating it is just, it's good. However, the ending to the story is a letdown, as the game's minimal storytelling subtly suggests a certain narrative outcome, but what we actually get feels completely disconnected and just thrown out of nowhere for shock value. And while it's not the worst ending I've seen, it definitely felt out of place. And surprisingly, despite being a roguelike, the replay value of the game doesn't feel too rewarding once you've beaten it, as the final boss stays the same, and the sort of bosses that appear throughout the game before the final bosses, they sort of rotate sometimes, but they only rotate between like 2 bosses each arena, so yeah, not the best variety. And unfortunately, to get all achievements, the game forces you to, well, complete a run with every single character type. And if you don't enjoy the character types, the experience becomes a chore, and I just don't think the gameplay loop is the best after you beat the final boss. And unfortunately, to get all achievements, the game requires you to complete a run with every single character type. But if you don't enjoy the specific character's mechanics, the experience becomes quite a chore. For example, we have the Samurai, which is a gameplay style that focuses around the focus stat, which I personally dislike, and managing focus is tedious and the payoff barely feels worth the effort. And while you're not strictly required to use the focus build with the Samurai, it's clearly what it's like designed to do, so it makes playing with other playstyles feel awkward. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the core gameplay loop, it's strong, it has a good like strategic depth to it, but once you beat the final boss, the experience just kind of stumbles as it doesn't keep your engagement in the long term. And I feel like a great roguelike should make repeated runs feel fresh and rewarding, but here the repetition really starts to feel like an obligation rather than an exciting challenge. And going into the game's artistic presentation, I'd say that it's undeniably one of its strongest aspects, as the pixel art is beautifully crafted, bringing Alina, the enemies, items, the arena, and everything else to life with vibrant detail. And the animations are also solid, as each attack feels punchy and each defensive maneuver carries real weight, as if you're just actually absorbing the impact. What makes the animations even better is that when you do good plays, the crowd actually gets hyped with you, and they start like dancing in their seats, jumping up and down, throwing stuff at you. Basically, they just become raving fans of you, and it really makes you feel like you're doing your best, and it makes you feel like you're a well-respected gladiator, and that you're doing everything you can to appeal to the crowd and just fight off your enemies. However, the opposite actually happens too, as when you're stalling or trying to turtle, essentially, the crowd starts booing at you and they start saying, "You suck," and things like that, because you're obviously not fighting, which is what they're coming there to look for. So it plays on both ways, and I think the animations and the sound designs and everything else is just well done for this. And even beyond the visuals, I say that the soundtrack is awesome, as the music perfectly complements each section of the arena and enhances the atmosphere and builds up the intensity of the battles. And honestly, some battles are just elevated from good to amazing purely because of the music's powerful presence and just great timing. And the quality of the soundtrack is so high that I've even added 3 tracks to my personal video game music playlist. And my favorites would be Another Triumph, which acts as the main theme of the game, Rise to the Clutch, and The Verdict. But from that high note, as previously mentioned before, achievement hunting is honestly a pain in this game, and it isn't the best experience. And the achievements, while challenging, are honestly a hassle, as many of them force you into different playstyles that you might not enjoy, such as a focus or block-based deck. And additionally, the game's randomized event system can be frustrating when hunting specific achievements, as they require these event systems to play perfectly in your favor. And while it's possible to manipulate events by quitting and reloading, it's a tedious process that I wouldn't recommend unless you're desperate to 100% the game. In the end, I think that Alina of the Arena delivers a overall exciting deck building experience with a surprisingly strategic gameplay loop with satisfying combat mechanics and a rewarding sense of progression. And this is further heightened by the amazing pixel art, animations, and soundtrack that just elevates the intensity of the battles and makes the encounters feel truly unforgettable. However, that doesn't mean this game isn't without its shortcomings, as I feel like the mechanics can be confusing for newcomers and the ending feels out of place. And I also think that the replayability suffers a bit, and while this may be more of an achievement hunter thing, I feel like the achievements are structured in a way that doesn't really make replaying it fun. And while the core gameplay is engaging, I feel like after you beat the final boss, the long-term rewards aren't really there, and there isn't really enough variety to make repeated runs feel good. They just feel like more of a grind than an exciting challenge after you beat, well, the main challenge of the game. But honestly, despite these flaws, I feel like the game is a solid addition to the roguelike deck builder genre, as it offers a unique and enjoyable experience for fans of strategic and turn-based combat. And while there may not be too much replayability after you beat the final boss of the game, I think that before then, it's really good fun, and you definitely get your money's worth out of it. Due to these reasons, I'll be giving Alina of the Arena a 4 out of 5 for casual players, and a 3 out of 5 for achievement hunters. So yeah, there are my thoughts on Alina of the Arena, and hopefully they were, well, an effective explanation on my experience with the game and what it has to offer. And if you have any further questions or want to share your thoughts on the game, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, then liking it would help me out a ton, and I encourage you to subscribe for more content like this. But for now, I'm off, and take care everyone.